This presentation is on employee motivation. Our learning objectives today are to explain how human drives result in employee motivation and describe the three drive need-based theories of motivation. We're also going to explain employee motivation using expectancy, organizational justice, and goal setting and feedback theories. Furthermore, we will compare and contrast job design approaches that increase work efficiency versus work motivation, and we are going to describe three strategies for improving employee motivation through job design. And finally, we're going to define empowerment and identify strategies that support empowerment. The first thing to look at is employees' drives and needs. Drives are primary needs that represent a universal and innate brain function that produce emotions that energize individuals to act on their environment. Common drives consist of the need for social interaction, competence or status, and to defend oneself against psychological harm or loss. Drives produce emotions which motivate individuals to take action. Next is needs. Needs are goal-directed forces that people experience, channel emotions towards specific goals to correct deficiencies or imbalances. The biggest difference is that emotions generate a certain response that turn into deliberate action in order to acquire a desired result. In comparing drives versus needs, when you look at drives, everyone has the same drives. We are hardwired in us as human beings to have the same sort of drives. However, needs vary due to type and intensity of emotions formed by drives. Social norms, an individual's background, and their personality all affect how we react to our drives, which helps us establish how we meet our needs. Everyone is hardwired to a certain degree on what drives them, and it's how we meet our needs that divide us and make us so unique. The main theories. The first theory we're going to look at is Maslow's needs of hierarchy, developed by Abraham Maslow in the 1940s. 5 basic categories consist of physiological needs, which are basic human needs such as water, food, air, shelter, etc. The second is safety, which is the need for stability and assurance that survival will continue. Third being belongingness, which is the need for love and affection, being a part of something bigger than yourself, such as a community or a group. Next, you have the esteem category, which is the need for high self-esteem. You need to feel as though you're worth something in society. And the top of the pyramid is self-actualization, which is realizing your true potential. The system works as a ladder, and once the bottom rung has been fulfilled, the next rung becomes the primary motivator. So once you meet your physiological needs, the next top priority becomes safety. Issues with Maslow's theory is that in reality, people are motivated by different things in different ways and are constantly reordering which needs are more important than others. Typically, people don't fit into one single needs hierarchy that's very individualized and much less universal than Maslow may suggest. However, Maslow has quite a bit of influence. He has developed a plethora of perspectives that first start out with a holistic perspective, which looks at the needs and drives together instead of individually. Human behavior is typically initiated by more than one driving it at the same time. This is followed by the humanistic perspective, which is higher order needs are driven more by personal and social influences rather than instincts. So things such as self-actualization, self-esteem, and belongingness have more to do with societal factors than actual basic instincts that are embedded in human DNA. Finally, the positive perspective, which is the theory that people are naturally motivated to reach their potential and that organizations and societies need to be structured to aid this continued development. So we as people want to be all that we can be. Next is the learned needs theory, which is developed by David McClelland, and it's that need strength can be altered through social influences such as reinforcement, learning new needs, and social conditions that affect needs. First being the need for achievement, and this is the desire to accomplish reasonably challenging goals through individuals' own efforts. Tend to work alone better than teams in striving for this need for achievement. You want all the credit, and you typically decide to embark on tasks that are not too easy and they're not too hard, so there's no high risk, high reward scenarios, and the main motivation is to be successful. Next is the need for affiliation, and this is the desire to seek approval from others, conform to other people's wishes and expectations, all while avoiding conflict and confrontation. Fulfilling this need for affiliation, people tend to project positive images of themselves. They want to support others and resolve conflict. When people are trying to fulfill this need, they can be seen as people pleasers, yes men, easygoing, etc. And next, you're looking at the need for power, and you run across this when you have people who desire to control others and are concerned about keeping power. They use persuasive techniques in communication, involved in various discussions, and often highly opinionated. There's two types of power seekers: those who are personalized power seekers, who enjoy power for its own sake, use it to advance personal interests, and can wear it as a symbol from time to time. The next is a more positive, and luckily the majority of people fall into this category of socialized power, where power is used as a means to help others. And finally, we'll look into the learning needs, and as McClelland's research supports his theory that needs can be learned, aka you can strengthen or weaken needs based off of reinforcement learning and social conditions. So this theory holds up relatively well in terms of fulfilling and identifying people's needs. The next theory is the four-drive theory. It's a contemporary motivation theory, and is developed by the Harvard Business School, a couple of professors, Paul Lawrence and Nitin Noria. And their basic theory is that everyone has a drive to acquire, bond, learn, and defend. The drive to acquire is the drive to seek, take, control, and retain objects and personal experiences. This goes beyond basic needs. It includes enhancing one's self-concept by comparison to society. It is the foundation of competition and basis for the need of self-esteem, or high self-esteem, as I should say. The drive to acquire is viewed as insatiable, meaning that you can never be satisfied. So you should never be satisfied in your drive to acquire. You should always aspire to more. Next, being the drive to bond, which is the drive to form social relationships and develop mutual caring commitments with one another. This explains formation of social groups, cliques, associations, organizations, clubs, etc. It also explains why people that lack these associations are more prone to serious health problems. This drives people to cooperate, and that is a fundamental component of organizational success. Next is the drive to learn. This drive is to satisfy curiosity. People want to know and understand not only ourselves, but the environment around us. When we don't understand something, we experience the need to understand it. That feeling is motivation. You want to fill in the blanks, so to say. And this drive, it relates back to the higher order needs of growth and self-actualization. So you're up there where it's very, very personal, and driven by external sources and less by your instincts. And then next you have the drive to defend, and this is a very basic concept. You want to protect yourself physically, socially, mentally, emotionally, etc. It creates the flight or fight response in the face of personal danger, and it goes further. It goes into the depths of defending, your relationship with others, the acquisitions of things that you have acquired over time, and your belief and the system of beliefs you have and that you've developed throughout your lifetime. As applied to employee motivation, emotions must be applied as motivation, and companies rely on social norms, people's past experiences, and individuals' personal values. The four drive theory states that emotions generated by the four drives motivate action. Personal and mental skill sets choose the course of action that is acceptable in society and to personal morality. So it's a combination of all these things that the four drive theory tries to take into consideration. And research supports this because there's been decades of research It avoids classic assumptions from the learned needs in the Maslow theory. It also identifies emotional intelligence as a critical factor in employee motivation. So you're actually taking in, an individual's emotional awareness as opposed to just, relying on instincts and, basic emotional responses. It goes much deeper, cognitive sort of realization of how you feel about something. As good as this theory may be, it's still incomplete. But practical implications, it tells businesses that you need to create an environment that best suits the ability for employees to meet these drives. And at the same time, you need to create a balance so you don't have too much employees who are able to acquire but they're not able to learn, or they're able to bond but they can't defend themselves. It has to be a good balance. Now, generally speaking, all of these drives in the four drive theory are innate and universal, hardwired, much like Maslow's theories, but in contrast, they're independent of one another. Whereas Maslow, you had like a ladder where you're climbing the ladder of needs, where these are all independent of each other. With that being said, you have proactive versus reactive drives, and you have proactive drives where the first three, you have acquire, bond, and learn, which are self-motivated, where the drive to defend is reactive, and it's only activated when certain situations require that it be. You don't need to you don't always feel the need to defend yourself, but this theory kind of says that you always have the drive to acquire, bond, and learn. Moving on, we have the expectancy theory of motivation, and this theory is based on the idea that work effort is directed towards behaviors that people will believe will lead to desired outcomes. It has three factors. First off is the E to P factor, expectancy, which is individuals' perception that their effort will result in a particular level of performance, and they either have the belief that they can achieve the task without any sort of question or doubt, and on the other hand, you have sometimes they feel they cannot achieve their desired outcome no matter how hard they work, so it's essentially helpless. To help employees achieve their potential, companies should ensure that employees have the necessary competencies, their clear role perceptions, and necessary resources to reach a desired level of performance. All those are crucial in meeting the expectancy of E to P. Next, you have P to O, which is the perceived probability that a specific behavior performance level will lead to a particular outcome. You either have the certainty that accomplishing a specific task will result in desired outcome, which is a probability of 1.0, or the certainty that accomplishing a specific task will have no effect on the outcome, which is a probability of 0. Commonly, the result is between these two extremes. Improving this expectancy can be accomplished by accurately measuring employee performance and distributing more value to those with high job performance. The last factor is outcome valences. A valence is the anticipated satisfaction or dissatisfaction that an individual feels toward an outcome. This factor represents a person's anticipated satisfaction with the outcome. A positive valence happens when the outcome is. Moving on to organizational justice, you have two forms. You have distributive justice, which is the perceived fairness in the outcomes we receive compared to our contributions and the outcomes and consequences of others. Next, you have procedural justice, which is the fairness of procedures used to decide the distribution of resources. Following these two forms, you have the equity theory, which states that employees determine feelings of equity by comparing their own outcome input ratio to outcome input ratio of other people. If they feel as though inequity exists, employee motivation is affected. If employees feel as though they are under-rewarded in comparison with their coworkers, their motivation may be negatively affected and result in unethical and harmful behavior. This theory is widely studied and has been quite successful at predicting various situations involving feelings of workplace injustice, but it doesn't identify the comparisons others have and doesn't indicate which inputs or outcomes are most valuable to each employee. So it is an incomplete theory despite its successful reputation in predicting where employees might feel as though they were being unfairly treated. Moving on, to the procedural justice factor, companies should always try to improve procedural justice, and in doing so, you can start by giving employees a voice in the process. Employees are very receptive to feeling like they have a voice. Once you do that, you need to follow up by picking an individual. Next is goal setting and feedback practices. Goal setting is just the process of motivating employees and clarifying their role perceptions by establishing performance objectives. This potentially improves employee performance in two ways. It can amplify intensity and persistence of effort, and it gives the employees clear role perceptions so their effort is channeled towards behavior that will improve work performance. It contains 6 characteristics that are all very crucial. The first being setting specific goals. Employees work harder when they work towards a specific goal, and they're motivated because they communicate precise performance expectations so employees can direct their effort efficiently and reliably. The second is relevant goals, and the goals must be relevant to an individual's job, and the individual must have some control over goal outcome. Next, you need to establish challenging goals. This causes people to raise the intensity and persistence of their work effort and to think through information more actively. It will also lead to personal achievement or growth needs when the goal is achieved. It causes people to become creative, which helps them learn as well. Following this, you have goal commitment, which is important because you want people to be committed to completing the goal. And challenging goals are only effective if employees are committed to them. So the goal commitment and challenging goals kind of go hand in hand, because you need to find that optimal level of difficulty and commitment that achieves the desired result. Next, we go into goal participation, and this is crucial because it goes back to employees having a voice, which goal setting is usually more effective when employees are involved in the process of setting the actual goals. Participation of employees generally creates more commitment to the goal, as well as improved goal quality because employees can contribute valuable information that managers may not have. Employees do have that kind of information, and it's important to involve them in the decision-making process because you never know what they may be able to bring to the table. And finally, you have goal feedback, and that's just because employees want to know whether the goal was achieved or if they're working towards it, if they're headed in the direct direction, and feedback can reinforce or redirect efforts in the appropriate manner. To touch further on feedback, there's the 4 crucial elements of feedback that need to exist in order for it to be effective. It needs to be specific and relevant, and it has to be timely. You can't wait forever to give somebody feedback on the job they're doing. It must be credible. The feedback has to come from somebody that the employee is going to trust, or they're going to follow their advice. And the feedback has to come at a sufficiently frequent rate. I mean, you can't have feedback once in a while. You need to have feedback on a regular basis in order to actually be effective. In touching on feedback, you have a main theory, which is strength-based coaching. It's a positive organizational behavior approach to coaching and feedback that focuses on building and leveraging the employee's strengths rather than trying to correct the weaknesses. It's essentially positive reinforcement. You also have to manage the sources of feedback that employees may encounter. There are many sources of feedback, and the essential factor in deciding which feedback is best is what is the purpose of the information. If you're going to try and determine progress toward a goal accomplishment, you want to focus on non-social sources such as computer information or data. Gives the employee clear-cut, specific information on how to improve themselves, and it's very objective. You don't have somebody coming down on you, so to speak. And especially if it's negative feedback, it's much better to receive that kind of feedback from non-social sources than feeling as though your peers or your managers or your superiors are coming down on you. Trying to give positive feedback, encourage social sources. Have coworkers, your supervisors, anybody come to the person and tell them that they did a job well done, it'll greatly increase their motivation and their self-esteem about what they're doing. There are a few issues when it comes to goal setting and feedback, and the next big idea is the job design practices. Job design is the process of assigning tasks to a job, including the interdependency of those tasks with other jobs. The first step is to establish work efficiency through job design. And when you get into that, you hit job specialization, which is result of division of labor in which work is subdivided into separate jobs assigned to different people. It's one of the oldest forms of job design, where each job requires a narrow subset of tasks, usually completed in a short cycle time, aka something like an assembly line. It's aimed to improve work efficiency, and it increases work efficiency because employees' specific aptitudes or skills can be matched for jobs they're best suited for. So you have somebody who's a carpenter, he's a carpenter. You have somebody who's a welder, he's a welder. They perform tasks that are tailor-made to their skill set. And additionally, there are fewer tasks to perform, thereby using less time to change activities. Just requires employees to be focused on the same task day in and day out, and they're the masters of that task. So ideally, everything goes smoothly, quickly, and efficiently. The next idea is that you can have scientific management, and this is the practice of systematically partitioning work into its smallest elements and standardizing tasks to achieve maximum efficiency. It's usually associated with high levels of job specialization. Problems with job specialization is that extreme job specialization can adversely affect an employee's attitudes and motivation. The job may become tedious, trivial, and isolating. And when somebody begins to master a job, the motivation goes away because it's so easy. Jobs that are more complex tend to increase work motivation, but at the same time, it can decrease as the ability to master the job may be very difficult. So an individual may experience lots of failures, which causes frustration to the employee. This, again, goes back to being able to find the correct balance between these motivating factors. Next up, we're looking at work motivation through job design. And there's a couple theories here. The first one being the motivator hygiene theory. And it's a pretty simple method. Employees are primarily motivated by growth and esteem needs, not by lower level needs. So the only thing that really matters is what the characteristics of the jobs are. And on the other hand, employees can become dissatisfied with poor working conditions or other factors such as job security, yada yada yada, lower order needs. It's focused around the idea that as long as the lower order needs are satisfied, it will prevent dissatisfaction. Unfortunately, this theory was rejected due to lack of research support. However, it did lead to new ways of thinking, which brings us into the job characteristics model, which is derived from the motivator hygiene theory, and it identifies 5 core dimensions that produce 3 very important psychological states. The first characteristic being skill variety. This is the need to use different skills and talents to complete the work. The second characteristic is task identity. This is the degree to which a job requires completion of a whole or identifiable piece of work. The third is task significance, and this is the degree to which, continuing with the job design practices, you find practices that motivate one another. And the first one being the job rotation. And this is the practice of moving employees from one job to another. The main benefits of job rotation are minimization of health risk from repetitive strain and heavy lifting because employees use different muscles in different jobs. It also supports multitasking, which increases workforce flexibility. And finally, it potentially reduces boredom of highly repetitive jobs. Next practice, you have job enlargement. This occurs when more tasks are assigned to an existing job. This simply increases skill variety because more tasks are being performed, and it significantly improves work efficiency and flexibility. One downside is, though, that research suggests that it does nothing to improve motivation, overall performance, or the satisfaction an employee feels for their job. The final practice is job enrichment. Finally, we're going to look at empowerment practices. Empowerment is essentially the perfect combination. It is an individual's feeling of self-determination, meaning, competence, and impact regarding their role in the organization. Self-determination is, when empowered employees feel as though they have freedom, independence, and discretion over their work activities. When empowered employees feel they have meaning, it's that they care about their work and believe what they do is important. Then you come up with the competence level, which is so crucial in any job, and it's where employees are confident about their ability to perform the work well and have the capacity to grow with new challenges. And if you have these three things, then you're going to nail the last dimension, which is having an impact. And empowerment is rounded out with this idea that employees view themselves as active participants in the organization, that what they do has some influence, and what they produce for the company actually matters. There's widespread